Klaxon 9 flexed his forearms with smug satisfaction, watching the tiny blue planet rotate lazily below their battlecruiser. His twin brother, Vortex 12, was busy polishing his plasma rifle for the third time this cycle, because apparently that's what you do when you're about to conquer a species that still uses wheels for transportation. "Brother," Klaxon said, his voice dripping with that special kind of arrogance reserved for beings who'd never lost a fight, "these Earth creatures are going to be pathetically easy. Look at their military reports." He gestured at the holographic display showing human soldiers with their primitive weapons. "They still fire metal projectiles. Metal! Can you believe it?" Vortex 12 chuckled, a sound like grinding gears mixed with dying electronics. "The intelligence reports say their females are even weaker than their males. Something about biological limitations and physical differences. How wonderfully convenient for us." Both aliens stood 7 feet tall, with skin that shifted between purple and green depending on their mood. Right now, they were practically glowing purple with anticipation. Their species, the Zephyrians from the Andromeda sector, had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. Earth was supposed to be lucky number 48. "I've already picked out my target," Klaxon announced, pulling up a surveillance file. "Human designation: Rebecca Stone. Age 28. Works as something called a personal trainer in a place called Denver. The reports say she spends her time helping other humans lift heavy objects repeatedly." He snorted. "What kind of pointless activity is that?" Vortex 12 leaned over to examine the data. "She looks small, even for a human female. Are you sure you want to waste time with such an insignificant specimen?" "That's exactly why she's perfect." Klaxon's eyes gleamed with malicious glee. "When we broadcast her defeat across their primitive communication networks, it will demoralize their entire species. Imagine it. 2 mighty Zephyrian warriors overpowering their strongest female. They'll surrender within solar rotations." The brothers had it all planned out. Land near her residence, challenge her to combat, record the inevitable victory, then broadcast it to every screen on the planet. Simple. Effective. Absolutely foolproof. Their ship's AI, a sophisticated system called Magnus 7, interrupted their planning session. "Warning: atmospheric entry in 60 time units. Recommend final equipment check." Both aliens strapped on their energy shields, plasma weapons, and neural disruptors. Their armor could deflect bullets, absorb energy blasts, and regulate temperature in any environment. Each brother also carried a personal force field generator that could stop a tank shell. "Overkill much?" Vortex 12 asked, examining his reflection in his polished chest plate. "There's no such thing as overkill when establishing dominance," Klaxon replied sagely. "Besides, we want to look impressive for the recording devices." The ship descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its stealth systems keeping it invisible to human detection. They touched down in a remote area outside Denver, just as the local star was setting. Perfect timing for maximum dramatic effect. "Remember the plan," Klaxon said as they marched toward the city. "We locate the target, issue the challenge, defeat her soundly but not fatally, then move on to Phase 2 of the invasion." "What if she runs?" Vortex 12 asked. "She won't. Humans have this peculiar thing called pride. They can't resist defending it even when facing impossible odds. It's adorable, really." They found Rebecca Stone's apartment building easily enough, a modest structure that humans called a complex, though it was anything but complex by Zephyrian standards. The brothers activated their translation devices and practiced their intimidating speeches one more time. "Human female," Klaxon would begin. We are the mighty Zephyrian warriors Klaxon 9 and Vortex 12. Prepare to face us in combat, that your defeat might serve as an example to your pathetic species." "Very dramatic," Vortex 12 nodded approvingly. "I especially like the pathetic species part. Really drives the point home." They climbed to the third floor, located apartment 3B, and pressed the door chime. The sound was disappointingly ordinary, nothing like the harmonic resonance chimes of their homeworld. Footsteps approached from inside, light footsteps, delicate even. This was going to be almost too easy. The door opened, and Rebecca Stone appeared. She was indeed smaller than the brothers had expected. About 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair pulled back in something humans called a ponytail, wearing strange, tight-fitting garments that appeared designed for physical activity. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up at the two massive aliens without so much as blinking. Klaxon was momentarily taken aback by her calm demeanor. Shouldn't she be screaming by now? Running? Fainting? That's what happened on most worlds when the locals first encountered Zephyrians. He began, then caught himself. "I mean, yes, human female. We are the mighty Zephyrian warriors." "Hold that thought," Rebecca interrupted, holding up one finger. "Are you guys here about the noise complaints? Because I already talked to the landlord about moving my workout sessions to earlier in the day." Vortex 12 blinked all 4 of his eyes. "Noise complaints?" "Yeah, Mrs. Patterson downstairs has been complaining about my deadlifts. I tried to explain that proper form requires controlled drops, but apparently the sound carries through the floor." She paused, really looking at them for the first time. "You're not from the landlord's office, are you? You're a little tall and purple, and you have way too many arms." "We are alien invaders," Klaxon shouted, his voice echoing off the hallway. "Walls. We have come to challenge you to combat as the first step in conquering your world." Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "Okay, that's definitely not about the noise complaints then." She checked what appeared to be a timekeeping device on her wrist. "Look, I've got a client in an hour, so if we're going to do this whole alien challenge thing, we need to keep it moving. You want to come in? Or are we doing this in the hallway? Because Mrs. Patterson is definitely going to complain if we get loud out here." The brothers exchanged confused glances. This wasn't going according to plan at all. Humans were supposed to be terrified of alien contact. Where was the panic? The desperate pleading? The inevitable attempt to flee? "You're not afraid," Vortex 12 observed, stating what seemed obvious. "Should I be?" Rebecca asked. "I mean, you're clearly not human, and you're talking about conquering Earth, which sounds bad. But you also knocked politely instead of just breaking down my door, and you're having a conversation instead of immediately attacking. So either you're really polite invaders, or there's more to this story." Klaxon's head was starting to hurt. None of their intelligence reports had prepared them for this scenario. Humans were supposed to be simple, predictable creatures driven by basic emotions like fear and aggression. "Look," Rebecca continued, "I'm going to assume you're serious about this challenge thing. What exactly did you have in mind? Because I've got mats if you want to do this properly, and my neighbor's out of town, so we can use his apartment if we need more space." You're accepting our challenge?" Vortex 12 stammered. "Why wouldn't I? I assume this is some kind of strength contest, right? Trial by combat? I've been training for 12 years. If I'm going to represent humanity in whatever this is, I'd rather not embarrass our species." She stepped aside and gestured for them to enter her apartment. "Come on in. Let me grab my gear." The brothers followed her inside, their confidence beginning to waver slightly. The apartment was small by Zephyrian standards, but every available surface seemed to be covered with strange metal objects of various shapes and sizes. "What are all these devices?" Klaxon asked, picking up what looked like a metal stick with round objects attached to each end. "That's a dumbbell," Rebecca replied, pulling equipment out of a closet. 40 pounds. I use it for arm exercises." She paused, watching him examine the weight. "Here, try lifting it." Klaxon grasped the device with one hand and lifted it casually. "It's quite light." "With one hand, sure. Try holding it at arm's length for 5 minutes." "Why would anyone do that?" "Training, building strength and endurance, making your muscles adapt to stress so they become stronger." She pulled out what appeared to be a thick mat and spread it on the floor. "Same principle as combat training, I'd imagine. You practice, you improve, you get better at not dying when things get serious." Vortex 12 was examining other objects around the room. These metal discs appear to be quite heavy. 45-pound plates, Rebecca confirmed. "I can deadlift 420 for reps, which isn't spectacular, but it's respectable for my weight class." Both aliens stared at her blankly. "You can lift 420 pounds?" Klaxon asked slowly. "Yeah, more on a good day." "Why?" That's nearly 3 times your body weight." Rebecca shrugged. "Humans are stronger than we look, especially when we train properly." She finished setting up the mat and turned to face them. "So, what are the rules for this challenge? Full contact? Submission only? Are weapons involved?" The brothers were beginning to realize they might have underestimated their target slightly. Not that it mattered, of course. They were still 7-foot-tall alien warriors with advanced technology and natural physical advantages. One small human female, no matter how surprisingly strong, couldn't possibly pose a real threat. "Hand-to-hand combat," Klaxon announced, trying to regain his commanding presence. "No weapons. Victory by submission or incapacitation." "Both of you against just me?" Rebecca asked. "If that is acceptable to you?" She grinned, and for just a moment, both aliens felt a small, inexplicable chill run down their spines. "Oh, this is going to be fun," Rebecca said, and began stretching in ways that seemed to defy several laws of physics. The brothers removed their armor and weapons, stacking them neatly in the corner. Even without their technological advantages, they were still significantly larger and stronger than any human. This was still going to be easy. "Magnus 7, Klaxon spoke into his communication device. "Begin recording. Document the defeat of the human female for later broadcast." "Recording initiated," the AI confirmed. "All combat data will be preserved for analysis and propaganda purposes." Rebecca finished her stretching routine and stepped onto the mat. "Ready when you are, guys. Try not to break any of my furniture, okay? The security deposit on this place was brutal." The 2 Zephyrian warriors assumed combat positions, their 4 arms each giving them significant advantages in grappling situations. Their natural strength was easily twice that of a human male, and they had been trained in 17 different forms of combat since childhood. "Last chance to surrender, human," Vortex 12 offered magnanimously. "We will make your defeat quick and relatively painless." Rebecca bounced lightly on the balls of her feet, her movements fluid and controlled. "I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll pass. Besides, if I'm going to be humanity's representative in this thing, I should probably put up a decent fight." "Very well," Klaxon said solemnly. "Let us begin." Both brothers moved forward simultaneously, expecting to overwhelm her with their combined assault. The plan was simple: grab her arms, immobilize her, and end the fight quickly. They had exactly 1 second to realize their mistake before Rebecca moved. She didn't retreat or try to evade their attack. Instead, she stepped forward into their combined advance, dropped low, and swept Vortex 12's legs with a technique that sent him crashing to the floor with a surprised grunt. Before Klaxon could react to his brother's fall, Rebecca was already pivoting, using Vortex 12's stumble as leverage to drive her elbow into Klaxon's solar plexus, with enough force to double him over. "What?" Klaxon gasped, but Rebecca was already moving again. She grabbed his nearest arm, stepped behind him, and applied what humans called a standing arm bar. The leverage was perfect, the technique flawless, and the pain was immediate and intense. "Yield," Rebecca said calmly, applying just enough pressure to make her point clear. "Never!" Klaxon snarled, trying to use his other arms to break free. But Rebecca had positioned herself perfectly, using his own strength against him while staying just out of reach of his free limbs. Vortex 12 was back on his feet, shaking his head to clear it. He moved to help his brother, but Rebecca saw him coming. Without releasing her hold on Klaxon, she kicked backward, catching Vortex 12 in the knee with surgical precision. "Ow!" he yelped, stumbling backward. "That actually hurt." "It's supposed to," Rebecca replied, still maintaining her hold on Klaxon. "Pressure points are pressure points, regardless of species. The knee joint bends the same way whether you're human or whatever you guys are." Klaxon tried once more to break free, using all 4 arms to leverage against her grip. For a moment, it seemed like it might work. Then Rebecca shifted her weight slightly, adjusted her angle, and suddenly his superior strength was working against him instead of for him. "Basic physics," she explained conversationally, as if she wasn't currently dominating a 7-foot alien warrior. "Force multipliers, leverage, fulcrums. A 200-pound human can absolutely control a 300-pound opponent if they understand the principles involved." "This is impossible," Vortex 12 protested, circling them warily. "You're just one small human female." "Small is relative," Rebecca pointed out, "and being underestimated is actually a significant tactical advantage." She looked at Klaxon, who was still trapped in her hold. "You yielding yet?" "Because I can keep this up for a while, and I imagine it's getting pretty uncomfortable." Klaxon was indeed finding the position increasingly painful, but his pride wouldn't let him submit. "Vortex 12. Attack her from behind." "Already tried that," his brother replied ruefully. "She has eyes in the back of her head or something." "I have mirrors," Rebecca corrected, nodding toward the reflective surfaces positioned around her training area. "Situational awareness is important when you're training alone. You learn to use every advantage available." Vortex 12 studied the room more carefully, noting the strategic placement of the mirrors, the clear sight lines, the open space that gave maximum mobility. "This entire room is designed for combat training." "Close. It's designed for functional fitness training, but a lot of the principles overlap." Rebecca adjusted her grip slightly, making Klaxon wince. "Your move, tall, dark, and extra-armed. But I should probably mention that I'm getting warmed up now, so whatever you're planning, you might want to do it soon." The second Zephyrian warrior realized he was facing a much more complex problem than he'd initially thought. This human female wasn't just surprisingly strong or lucky. She was genuinely skilled, tactically aware, and apparently enjoying herself. Worse yet, she was right about getting warmed up. Her movements were becoming more fluid, more confident, and she showed no signs of fatigue, despite maintaining a controlling hold on his brother for several minutes. "This can't be happening," Vortex 12 muttered to himself. "We're advanced alien warriors. She's just one human." "One human who's been training for this her entire adult life," Rebecca corrected cheerfully. "While you guys were probably sitting in your spaceship making assumptions about human capabilities based on outdated intelligence reports." She wasn't wrong. Both brothers had relied entirely on their species' previous encounters with primitive worlds, never considering that humans might be different from other conquered species. "Vortex 12, Klaxon grunted through gritted teeth. "Stop talking and help me." His brother finally gathered his courage and charged forward, all four arms reaching out to grab Rebecca and force her to release Klaxon. It was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Rebecca released Klaxon just as Vortex 12 reached them, using her captive as a pivot point to swing around and catch the charging alien with a perfectly timed hip toss. The 7-foot warrior went flying through the air like a purple missile, landing hard against the far wall with a crash that definitely violated the lease agreement. "Sorry about the wall," Rebecca called out. "I'll talk to maintenance tomorrow." Klaxon, finally free from her grip, stumbled forward, clutching his sore arm. "How did you do that?" The leverage calculations alone should have been impossible. "Judo classes since I was 8, Rebecca replied, bouncing on her toes again. "Plus, wrestling in high school, Brazilian jiu-jitsu in college, and mixed martial arts for fun. Turns out, humans have been figuring out creative ways to hurt each other for thousands of years. We're really good at it." Vortex 12 peeled himself off the wall, looking decidedly less confident than when this whole adventure started. "This doesn't make sense. Our combat simulations showed human females as the weakest demographic on your planet." "Ah, there's your problem," Rebecca said, cracking her knuckles in a way that made both aliens flinch. "You based your intel on averages and stereotypes instead of actually understanding the species you were planning to conquer. Classic strategic blunder." She started walking toward them, and despite being outnumbered 2-1 by opponents twice her size, both Zephyrian warriors instinctively took a step backward. "See, here's what your fancy reports probably didn't mention," Rebecca continued conversationally. "Human females aren't weaker than human males. We're built differently, sure, but weakness? That's a social construct, not a biological reality. And when you combine 12 years of dedicated training with what we call righteous anger at being invaded." She smiled, and it wasn't a particularly friendly expression. "Well, that's when things get interesting." "Righteous anger?" Klaxon repeated. "Oh, yeah. See, I was having a perfectly nice evening. Planned to watch some Netflix, eat some ice cream, maybe do a light workout before bed. Then you two show up at my door talking about conquering my planet and using me as an example to demoralize my entire species." Her eyes narrowed. "I take that personally." Magnus 7's voice crackled through their communication devices. "Warning! Combat efficiency has decreased by 78%. Recommend tactical withdrawal." "We're not retreating from one human," Vortex 12 snapped at the AI. "We're elite Zephyrian warriors." "Were," Rebecca corrected. "Past tense, because right now, you're two aliens who are about to get schooled by someone who bench presses your ego and deadlifts your assumptions about human limitations." The brothers looked at each other, trying to formulate a new strategy. Their original plan had been to overwhelm her with superior numbers and strength. That clearly wasn't working. Their backup plan had been to use their advanced reflexes and combat training. Also not working. Plan C was looking increasingly like run away very fast, but their pride wouldn't let them consider it. "Perhaps," Klaxon said slowly, We underestimated the capabilities of this particular specimen. But 2-against-1 odds are still in our favor. Are they, though? Rebecca asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you guys have never fought anyone who actually knew what they were doing. How many of those 47 worlds you conquered had professional fighters? How did you know about Vortex 12 started? You literally told me earlier. You were bragging about it. Not exactly classified information when you announce it to your target. Rebecca began stretching again, her movements fluid and controlled. But that's beside the point. The real question is, do you want to continue this and risk serious injury, or would you prefer to call this a learning experience and go back to whatever rock you crawled out from under? The offer was reasonable, logical even. Both aliens recognized they were facing an opponent who had exceeded every expectation and assumption they'd made about human combat capabilities. Unfortunately, Zephyrian psychology didn't handle being outclassed by supposedly inferior species very well. Never! Both brothers shouted simultaneously, charging forward with all 4 arms extended. Your funeral, Rebecca sighed. What happened next could only be described as a master class in applied physics, human stubbornness, and why you should never pick fights with people who do this for a living. Rebecca didn't try to fight both aliens at once. Instead, she used their synchronized attack against them, stepping aside at the last possible moment and letting their momentum carry them into each other. The collision sounded like 2 freight trains having an argument. While they were untangling themselves, she grabbed Klaxon's ankle and twisted, using a technique that sent him spinning across the room like a purple pinwheel. He crashed into her bookshelf, sending training manuals and nutrition guides cascading down on his head. "Oh, come on," Rebecca protested. "Those books are alphabetized." Vortex 12 tried to grab her from behind while she was distracted, but Rebecca had been expecting that. She dropped into a crouch, grabbed his approaching arm, and used his own forward momentum to flip him over her shoulder. He landed flat on his back with a wheeze that sounded like air escaping from a balloon. "Basic Aikido," she explained, though neither alien was in much condition to appreciate the lesson. Redirect the attacker's energy instead of opposing it directly. Very efficient. Klaxon was struggling to his feet, covered in paperwork, and looking considerably less intimidating than when he'd started. "This is impossible. You're violating several laws of physics." "Which laws, specifically?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious. "Because I'm pretty sure everything I'm doing follows standard Newtonian mechanics. Force, acceleration, leverage, center of gravity. Basic stuff, really. Humans aren't supposed to be this strong." "Says who? Your intelligence reports?" Rebecca laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both amused and terrifying. "Let me guess. You observed humans from a distance, maybe intercepted some communications, ran it through your computers, and came up with average strength values based on general population data?" The look on Klaxon's face suggested she'd hit the mark exactly. "Here's the thing about averages," Rebecca continued, helping Vortex 12 to his feet with surprising gentleness. "They don't tell you about the outliers, the athletes, the martial artists, the people who've dedicated their lives to pushing human performance to its absolute limits." She gestured around her apartment, pointing out details the aliens had missed earlier. Training certificates on the walls, competition trophies on the shelves, photos of her with various martial arts instructors and training partners. "I'm not an average human," she said. Simply. "I'm what happens when an average human spends 15 years learning how to not be average anymore." Magnus 7's voice interrupted again. "Combat analysis complete. Recommendation: immediate strategic withdrawal. Human opponent demonstrates capabilities exceeding all projections by factor of 8.7. Finally, Rebecca exclaimed, an AI with some sense. You should listen to your computer. We cannot retreat, Klaxon insisted, though he was swaying slightly on his feet. The honor of the Zephyrian Empire demands— The honor of the Zephyrian Empire, Rebecca interrupted, is about to demand you explain to your superiors how 2 elite warriors got their butts handed to them by one human in her pajamas. Both aliens looked down, suddenly noticing that Rebecca was indeed wearing what appeared to be sleepwear. Comfortable pants and a tank top with a cartoon cat on it that read, "I woke up like this." "Those are your combat garments," Vortex 12 asked weakly. "These are my relaxation garments," Rebecca corrected. "I wasn't planning on kicking alien ass tonight. It just sort of happened." The full implications of this statement hit both warriors simultaneously. They had come prepared for battle, armed with advanced intelligence, superior technology, and detailed combat plans. She had answered the door in her pajamas, and was still winning. "Perhaps," Klaxon said carefully, "we may have made certain miscalculations regarding human combat effectiveness." "You think?" Rebecca asked, but her tone wasn't mocking anymore. If anything, she sounded almost sympathetic. "Look, I get it. You guys probably steamrolled every other species you've encountered, showed up with your superior technology and physical advantages, and everybody just rolled over. But humans are different." She walked over to her kitchen and returned with 3 bottles of water, offering one to each alien. They accepted them gratefully. "We don't give up," she continued. "Ever. It's literally bred into our DNA. We're the species that looked at every apex predator on our planet and said, 'I bet I can take that.' We're the ones who saw fire and decided to steal it. We looked at the ocean and said, 'I'm going swimming.' We stared at the sky and said, 'I want to go there.'" She took a long drink of water before continuing. "And when someone shows up at our door talking about conquest and using us as examples to demoralize our species, well, that's when we get creative." Both aliens were listening intently now, their earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching respect. "Every human you see walking around," Rebecca said, "carries the genetic legacy of thousands of generations of survivors. People who looked at impossible odds and found a way through anyway. You want to conquer us? You better bring more than superior technology and physical strength. You better bring something we've never seen before. Because I guarantee you this: we've been figuring out how to beat bigger, stronger, more dangerous opponents since we climbed down from the trees." "So what happens now?" Vortex 12 asked quietly. Rebecca considered the question seriously. "Well, that depends. Are you planning to continue with this whole invasion thing, or have you maybe reconsidered your career choices?" The brothers looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that siblings have developed over decades of shared experience. "Magnus 7, Klaxon said finally. "Cancel invasion protocols. Initiate information gathering mode instead." "Confirmed," the AI replied. "All combat recordings have been preserved for analysis. Recommend immediate transmission to Zephyrian High Command for strategic review." "Good choice," Rebecca nodded approvingly. "And hey, if you guys want to stick around for a while, I'd be happy to show you some basic human combat techniques. Might save your lives next time you run into someone who's not as friendly as I am." "You consider this friendly?" Vortex 12 asked, rubbing his sore ribs. "Absolutely. I could have broken several of your bones if I'd wanted to. Instead, I just bruised your egos and gave you some valuable intelligence about human capabilities. Consider it a freebie. She walked over to her communication device and pressed several buttons. "Hey, Jim?" "Yeah, it's Rebecca. Listen, I've got 2 aliens in my apartment who just tried to invade Earth, but we've worked things out. Can you bring some of that good coffee you're always bragging about? And maybe some of those cookies your wife makes? Thanks." She hung up and turned back to the confused aliens. "That was my neighbor. He's a retired Marine. Figured you guys might want to meet someone who represents the other end of the human combat spectrum." "Other end?" Klaxon asked nervously. "Yeah, I'm the technical, finesse-based fighter. Jim's more of the hit things really hard until they stop moving type. Between the 2 of us, we can give you a pretty comprehensive overview of human martial capabilities." 10 minutes later, Jim arrived. He was shorter than Rebecca, probably in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of build that suggested he'd spent decades staying in shape. He took one look at the 2 7-foot aliens sitting politely on Rebecca's couch, and nodded as if this was perfectly normal. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, setting down a thermos and a box of cookies. "I understand you're new to the neighborhood." "They tried to invade Earth," Rebecca explained casually. "I convinced them it might not be their best career move." "Ah," Jim said, pouring coffee for everyone. "Well, that's neighborly of you. Most folks would have just called the police." He offered cookies to the aliens, who accepted them with the bewildered air of beings whose entire worldview had just been turned upside down. "These are excellent," Vortex 12 said, examining his cookie with scientific interest. "My wife's recipe," Jim replied proudly. "She says the secret is using real butter instead of that synthetic stuff." And so the evening continued, with 2 would-be alien conquerors sitting in a human apartment, drinking coffee, eating homemade cookies, and learning that maybe, just maybe, they'd picked the wrong species to mess with. As they prepared to leave several hours later, both aliens looked significantly different than when they'd arrived. Less arrogant, more thoughtful, and definitely more respectful. "Thank you," Klaxon said formally, "for the educational experience." "Thank you for not breaking any of my furniture," Rebecca replied. "Well, except for that small dent in the wall, but I'm sure the security deposit will cover it." "We will inform our people that Earth is not suitable for conquest," Vortex 12 added. "Perhaps we might consider diplomatic relations instead." "That sounds much more civilized," Rebecca agreed. "And hey, if you guys ever want to open up some kind of cultural exchange program, I know a lot of people who would love to learn about your technology. In exchange, we could teach you some things too." "Such as?" "Well," Rebecca grinned, "you've seen what one trained human can do. Imagine what we could accomplish if we worked together instead of against each other." The 2 aliens exchanged another look, this one filled with possibilities rather than conquest plans. "We will consider this carefully," Klaxon said. "Perhaps our species have more to offer each other than we initially thought." As they walked back to their ship, both brothers were quiet, processing the events of the evening. "Brother," Vortex 12 said finally, "I think we may have learned something important tonight." "Yes," Klaxon agreed. "Never underestimate a species based on incomplete data. That, and never pick fights with humans who have home gym equipment." They boarded their ship and prepared for departure. Their mission parameters completely changed. Instead of conquest footage, they carried diplomatic possibilities. Instead of victory recordings, they had respect for a species that had surprised them at every turn. As their ship lifted off into the night sky, Rebecca watched from her window, already planning her next workout routine. Tomorrow she'd add some new techniques to her training schedule inspired by fighting opponents with 4 arms instead of 2. After all, you never knew when that kind of experience might come in handy again. The invasion of Earth had lasted exactly 3 hours and ended not with surrender or conquest, but with coffee, cookies, and the beginning of what might someday become a beautiful friendship. Sometimes the best way to handle would-be invaders is to show them that some battles aren't worth fighting, and some species are better as allies than enemies. Rebecca Stone, personal trainer and inadvertent diplomat, had just changed the course of interstellar relations without breaking a sweat. Well, not much of a sweat anyway.